All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday evening or whatever day or time it is that you are viewing this. We appreciate you, appreciate your support, and thank you again for joining us. My name is Dr. Callan Stittelberg from Trillium Spinal Care, located right here in Rochester, Minnesota. I will be talking tonight about a little something called the Atlas Subluxation Complex. This is essentially why we do what we do. As upper cervical chiropractors, as a NUCA chiropractor, why do I focus solely on the topmost part of the bone or the topmost part of the neck and that top bone when you have the entire rest of the spine to worry about? Well, we'll get into that tonight. And we'll be discussing one of the maybe more major theories as to what's actually happening when we get the correction that we're looking for. Why do we get the improvements that we get? Why do we get the extraordinary sort of changes that we see often? For instance, when someone has shooting pain down their leg from, what they perceive as sciatic type pain, whether it is or isn't sciatic pain doesn't matter. If they have shooting pain down their leg all the way to their ankle, all they care about is it going away. And if all we do is gently adjust them at the top of the neck, how does that do anything? And why do we consistently see it alleviate that pain extremely quickly? We'll get into that tonight. The other thing, of course, if you've been sticking with us, you know that if you share this, you will get entered to win some chocolate from the chocolate shop. So we've got 4 chocolate shop gift cards we'll be giving away tonight. So make sure and share. Tiff, thanks for joining on Insta. We'll be getting into it. And like I said, for a little bit, we'll probably be diving into some of the more high-end neurological stuff, but for most of it, we'll try and keep pretty simple. And we may end up doing, a 2 or 3 part focus on the Atlas Subluxation Complex, just because there is so much information and there's no reason to try and overwhelm anyone or anything like that, especially if you're trying to better understand what it is that we're actually doing. How are we actually getting the changes that we're trying to get? So first off, just some really simple stuff to remember. The Atlas joint, right? The joint area between the atlas bone, that's the top one on the spine. Remember, this is the cranial bone, so this is your skull. Here's that top bone in the neck, and here's that second bone in the neck, the axis bone. So this joint space between that first bone, between the skull and the first bone, and the first bone and the second bone, it is extremely vulnerable to any sort of force, to any sort of pressure that's going to come through the spine. It's going to impact this one more than any other. And that's for simple anatomical reasons. So we'll quick review a few of those. For instance, all the way down the spine, we see that we have a disc between each vertebrae. Now that disc is really tough, fibrous, cartilaginous material. It's filled with a jelly-like substance in almost like a sac kind of thing, and it's going to provide stability for the spine. You'll notice at C1, that atlas bone, you'll notice there's no disc above or below that first one. There's no disc above or below that first bone. So you'll also notice, if we go down the side here, we've got these things called zygapophyseal joints. It's a fancy way of saying these bones overlap. So they keep these vertebrae all the way down the spine from rotating because those zygapophyseal joints overlap. It's another way to provide stability for the spine. You'll notice, looking at this top bone, there's no zygapophyseal joint above or below that first bone. The only thing that keeps that top bone in position is soft tissue. It's muscles and it's ligaments. So if we have this force if we have any sort of force, any sort of hit to the spine, it's going to impact essentially the weakest link in the entire spine. That's that top bone. That's that top joint. like I said, it's just soft tissue that's keeping it in position. That's another reason why we can have such a gentle correction. And we'll go into further detail on that later. But the adjustment itself to this top bone can be extremely gentle because the only thing that's keeping this bone in position is the soft tissue, its muscles and its ligaments. Okay. So, like I said, that top bone is the most vulnerable joint in the spine. So it is the most freely movable joint in the spine. It sacrifices stability for mobility. We get all this range of motion coming from this, not all of it, but vast majority of it comes from this top joint in the neck. So that's why it's very important, and that's why it's also freely movable. But it does protect some very important stuff. Now, one of the things that is going to work to keep that top bone in position, if you know that top bone, the atlas bone here, inside of that atlas bone is the brainstem. Now, this brainstem shouldn't be impeded on. If the atlas bone slides one way or the other, it's going to put pressure on the outer edges of the brainstem. So to keep it from moving, we have these really, really tough ligaments called dentate ligaments. Now, dentate ligaments go all the way down the spine. We've got 21 paired ligaments all the way down the spine, and they connect on the inside part of the spinal bones here, where that brainstem, or where that nerve, where the spinal cord sits inside of the bones. You've got these dentate ligaments that are holding it in position. They're extremely tough. They're tough enough that there's different case situations where they've found that with extreme hydrocephalus, which is this essentially like extremely increased liquid in the brain, it can put enough pressure on that top part of the neck, on the spinal cord, that the dentate ligaments have actually been known to sever that top part of the spinal cord, the brainstem. That's how strong those ligaments are, and they're stronger at the top than they are as they go down. They aren't as strong at the top. They're straight lateral, and they are the strongest dentate ligaments in the entire body. So, like I said, they can actually even cause that top area in the spinal cord to sever because of how strong they are. That's with, like I said, hydrocephalus, which is just an extreme increase in pressure in the skull, and a number of things can cause that, whether it's infection or reactions to different things. So that's side note. But anyway, so this top bone in the neck, the average misalignment for it is about 1/8 of an inch in a lateral direction. So if we're looking at, we would call it like the frontal plane, this top bone moving 1/8 of an inch. That's all it takes for the average misalignment in the top of the neck, which doesn't sound like much, except when you consider that top area of the spinal cord is about 1/2 inch in diameter. So if that top bone moves 1/8 of an inch, and you've got 1/2 inch in diameter at the top, you can see how that's going to have a big impact in that area. So now let's get into it just a little bit to talk about what exactly one of the theories. So like I said, we know that when we correct this top area in the neck, we can make all kinds of crazy changes to the body. Like I said, whether it's from, sciatic pain shooting down the leg, and all you're doing is gently touching up here, or changing someone's hearing or their vision, right? Like that's not, you don't have an adjustment to try and, do that. You don't have an adjustment to try and remove someone's migraines. You just align it, and then the body heals. But what is it that's actually happening? What's the mechanism of that healing process? Well, first you have to understand what is the mechanism that's causing the issue. One of the theories is something called dentate ligament theory, and it focuses on spinal cord tension. So remember, we were talking about those dentate ligaments in that inside of that top bone. Now, if this top bone moves a little bit, like I said, about 1/8 of an inch in a lateral direction, those dentate ligaments, those extremely tough ligaments, are going to be pulling and putting pressure in the further. If you think of the spinal cord, they're going to be putting pressure further out because that's where they're connected. They're connected to the outermost edge of that spinal cord. So if it moves a little bit, you're going to have this tethered sort of rope pulling on the top part of the neck, putting pressure on that outermost edge of the brainstem. A couple of spinal tracts that are on the outside edge of the brainstem. One is called the spinal thalamic tract, and the other is a spinal cerebellar tract. And you can think of tracts as, if you envision, and I wish I had some Twizzlers pull and peel because I could actually show it to you, but if you envision Twizzlers pull and peel, right? You've got a solid piece of candy, but it's divided into a whole bunch of smaller little pieces of rope that all combine to make a larger rope, essentially. That's what the tracts are doing in the spinal cord. So if you envision like the outsidemost edge of a Twizzlers pull and peel, one of those tracts is going to be one of those small pieces of the licorice, and that's going to be either the spinal thalamic tract or the spinal cerebellar tract. Those two tracts are responsible for, well, the spinal thalamic is responsible for pain and temperature, your body's understanding of pain and temperature, and the spinal cerebellar tract is responsible for muscle tone and like joint position understanding. So kind of understanding where your body's at in space, essentially. So both of these things, if they are being impeded on, you're going to change the communication of them. That's why someone can have, like I said, if you have this top area out of position, then all the way down the spine, we can see that there's going to be compensations. The muscle tones are going to be uneven, and we can have that shooting pain down the leg. It's also another reason why, if we have that top area out of position, we, for instance, do a leg check to see if one leg appears shorter than the other, as long as we know that they are absolutely the same length. In my office, we've physically measured each person's legs, probably somewhere around 800 or 900 patients that I've physically measured from the front of their hip to the middle part of the ankle. Less than 10 of them have had an anatomical short leg, meaning one leg is actually shorter than the other. Less than 10. Now, all the rest of them have what we would call a functional short leg. If you have a misalignment in the top of the neck, you'll have those compensations all the way down the spine. You'll have the tilt in the shoulders and the hips, and then you'll have these imbalances in the pelvic girdle, which causes one leg to appear shorter than the other. It's also important to recognize that both of these tracts, the spinal thalamic tract and the spinal cerebellar tract, the further out, we would call lateral, meaning further towards the outside of the tract, the more caudal it is, meaning down towards the bottom of the body. So the further outside is going to essentially communicate the information from downward up. As you go up, the information is going to come closer to the center. So if you envision, you've got this, like I said, you've got this spinal cord and you've got this pressure on the outermost edge. The first thing that's going to impact is towards the bottom of the body. And as you impact more of it, it's going to go up the body. So that's why we can have someone who can come in and barely stand up straight because they have such shooting pain in their low back and down their legs. And we can adjust them up here, and all of a sudden the pain can go away. It happens because there's a miscommunication from the brain to the rest of the body and from the rest of the body to the brain. When you get that corrected, you change the function. It's important to remove that pain. That's awesome. That's great. But we're already 14 minutes in. In our next segment on the Atlas subluxation complex, we're going to be talking about it's important to remove pain, but it's even more important to improve function. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, because there's a lot of things that actually will the function will actually be affected long before the pain is ever even noted. So pain, obviously, it lets you know there's something wrong. J Money, trap the heat. Pain lets you know that there's something going on, but it's more important to recognize what we really want to do is we want to improve function. So we'll get into that next time. So anyway, to wrap it up here at the end, like I said, if this top bone, which is the most vulnerable joint in the spine, if it's out of position, it's going to put pressure on the brainstem at the top. And remember, on that Twizzler's pull and peel, it's going to put pressure on that outermost tract. Those two of the outermost tracts are the ones that are going to be conveying that pain and that the joint positioning sensation, temperature, and movement. So if you have that out of position, that's why it can impact the entire lower half of the body. And if you get it corrected, you can see it improve, which is awesome. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, next one we'll be going further into detail, talking about a couple other of the theories as to why this tiny little adjustment at the top of the neck can have such an impact over the entire body. So, but before we do that, I'd better draw 4 lucky winners. So if you want to get in on this and try and win some chocolate from the chocolate shop, then make sure to share this or share any of the old ones, and we will get you entered. Mal does a great job of updating every single time. So even though some of us don't think she does, Zank, don't worry, she definitely does. So first one we are picking here, Jess Du Bois. Hey, Jess, congratulations. Thank you for sharing. Much appreciated. We'll get some chocolate shop gift cards sent your way. And I know you're in Milwaukee, but guess what? They'll ship it to anywhere. So that's super cool. And Luke Hoyard, you dog. Sparkler plug. We'll get you some sent out there in Colorado. But like I said, pretty awesome that chocolate shop sends them all over the U.S. So, and I took 2, so I guess both of those will be winners. Kathy Simpson, thank you, Mal's mom, super cool. Appreciate you, and appreciate you for sharing. And lastly, oh baby, Bryant Chip Neville, congrats. So we will get 4 gift cards sent out, and like I said, if you want to be entered, make sure to share this, and we will get it done. So. Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate you all for joining in. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Like I said, next month we'll be going into the second part of the Atlas subluxation complex. And by the way things are going, it might end up being a 3-parter. So if this is interesting to you, if you want to know more, if there's certain details that you'd like covered a little more in detail, please let me know. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, and we'll see you out there.